reaction or response from Dr. Elias Abdi, who's the Director General at the Ministry of Education. Dr. Abdi, it would seem the students in this particular case have been left on their own. This was something that was happening with the county government. Granted, it does fall under education. Who should they get answers from? Who would be responsible? Who would refund them the money if they were not able to get the education they sought?
Thank you very much. So I think this is an active case which is under investigation, and we just maybe wait for the investigating agencies to go up to ensure that they conclude on this matter. And this seems to have been an arrangement between the parents and from what we are getting from the news, an arrangement between the parents and the local authorities there at the county level. So I think at this stage, once the investigating agencies have taken over, the DCI, the EACC, I think it will be, logically, we have to wait for the conclusion of the investigation.
All right, but Dr. Mercy Wahome is also here with us. She's the CEO of the Kenya Universities and Colleges Central Placement Service, known as KUPS. So how does this happen? And remember, it's been taking place from one previous county government administration and now into a second.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. I think I see three things here. One, the students or the families are willing to pay anything to get quality education. Yeah, so the fact that the parents sold a tractor, had a community come together to do the Harambe, it means there's a lot of value in quality education. The first student talked about opportunity to work and study. We know that is something that, when it comes to work, employment, we have a problem of employment in the country or in the region generally. So again, being lured to that because of the opportunity to do both work and study. The programs that they were going for, most of them were going for nursing programs, which again is out of the demand that is there globally. So it is unfortunate that they got this, but when I look at what the issues of employment, working, I see an area that as government or generally as Kenyans, we need to look and see what are the gaps that we have and how can we fill in these gaps that the students who are going for. And I see it as an unfortunate situation, but also an opportunity for us to learn and pick up a few things in what has happened. Thank you.
Shukran sana Bi Wahome. Lakini kabla tujaenda kwake Bwana Monari, Dr. Elias Abdi, umesema swala hili kweli la chunguzo ndio, lakini ukiangalia hali kwamba kaunti fulani inaweza kuwa na ushirikiano na wazazi na wanafunzi kuwa na mkataba kama ule, kisha kaunti jirani pia iwe na mpango mwingine, uingie katika kaunti ya Nakuru iwe na mpango tofauti, hapa Nairobi mpango tofauti. Wazazi na washirikadau wa elimu hapa nchini huangalia Wizara ya Elimu. Wahisi swala hili laweza kuzuiwa kwa njia gani ama kudhibitiwa kwa njia gani ndipo tusiwe na masuala kama haya katika siku za usoni, kwamba kaunti zinaingia katika mikataba ambayo haidhibitiwi na Wizara ya Elimu?
I think
ikiwezekana kujibu kwa lugha ya Kiswahili.
No, I'll just speak in English because I'm used to that and on day-to-day basis, so I'll reply in English. So I think what there is, I think Dr. Wahome has also spoken to this. What I just want to say is that recently we have just launched this report, the report by His Excellency the President, especially on university education. There's a lot of rush for education outside the country. And, what we are doing is that we want to see how we can, make, higher education, especially within our country, to be more attractive to our children. Because outside there, it is estimated that many Kenyan, families are seeking education outside the country, which is okay. But at the end of it, there are a lot of, inhibiting factors in terms of, upward mobility within the education sector here within the country. For example, in the UK, it's estimated that we have around 5,000, Kenyans pursuing education there. In Uganda here, our neighboring country, there are quite a number of Kenyan students pursuing education there. So I think moving forward, I agree that this needs to be maintained. This needs to be somehow monitored and regulated. We don't just leave it like that for the families to suffer until maybe they find themselves that they have been somehow, maybe conned and so on. Okay. So I think moving forward, there's need to put regulations in place to govern this, especially our colleagues in the higher education sector. For me, I work in the basic education subsector, and the colleagues in the regulation area in higher education need to maybe put some effort in place.
Okay, Geoffrey Munari, wewe ndio unasimamia University Fund, hazina ambayo inafaa kutoa ufadhili kwa wanafunzi. Hisia zako ni zipi? Unaona mahangaiko kama yale ambayo wanafunzi wanapitia sawa na wazazi wao?
Asante sana. Hili swali ni swali ambalo sisi kama wanadau wa elimu tunafaa tuangalie kwa makini sana. Inafaa vile ndugu yangu Abdi amesema, makosa yamefanyika hapa, lakini hiyo imaanishi kuwa tuendelee vile tunaendelea hivi sasa. Tunafaa tuangalie hili jambo kwa makini, ndio likifanyika wakati mwingine tuwe tumeweka mikakati ambayo watu ambao wanaenda katika universities za nje wanaweza kuja kwetu, waangalie, wajue kama hizo universities zinatambulika hapa Kenya, na kuna idara inayoitwa Commission for University Education ambayo ina-equate universities za nje. Sasa hawa wangeenda waangalie kule, alafu waje kwenye Wizara ya Elimu pia waidhinishwe, ndio waende kule nje. Na kila kitu kingewekwa kwa meza, pesa hela ngapi wamelipwa, ziangaliwe kuwa hizo hela ndio fees ya Finland pale wanaenda. Alafu kila kitu kikiwa sawa, ndio wanafunzi waweze kwenda. Inaonekana kuna utata hapa, na huo utata tusiwache ufanyike kwa Wakenya wakati mwingine.
Yeah. Lakini sasa mnasema kwamba makosa yamefanyika. So who takes responsibility for this? How is it that, like, just to double down on Lincoln's question, that county governments are entering into some sort of arrangement, taking money on behalf of parents and students, and now we say makosa yamefanyika, which is all well and good, but what happens? I think, like Dr. Masia said, people pay money, people sell land, people sell their cows and their prized belongings for this. But then now, what happens? Who takes responsibility for this?
The higher education sector is not a devolved function.
Exactly, yeah.
This issue was dealt by the county government of Elgeyo Marakwet and Uasin Gishu. It's unfortunate that we have reached where we have reached. We don't have the facts of what really happened as we speak, so we cannot judge entirely and say so and so is at fault. What we are proposing is that moving forward, with the challenges that we have seen, we need to have clear guidelines, and these guidelines must be published, and Kenyans must be able to know that if you want to engage or go to a foreign university in case of any arrangement like this or any other arrangement, these are the clear guidelines to follow. But for now, since we don't know what transpired and who is wrong, we only put a caution and say that let us investigate and ensure that it does not happen to any innocent Kenyan again.
All right, thank you for that. We'll come back to Dr. Langat, who's also here with us, the CEO of TVETA. Much to talk about, and that is just the inroad of our conversation here this evening, and we're specifically getting into the funding question. And for that, now we take you to Sam Gituku, who's on Data Point with some numbers for us. Sam?
All right, thank you so much, Yvonne. Let's take a look at some of the ideas that are contained in the class of 2022. This is KCSE 2022, and what is going to happen to the class because there has been the new financing model. For instance, the government has said that out of the 140,000 students who will be joining universities starting September this year, 45,000 of them are vulnerable, and therefore they're going to get funding of up to some 82%, to be looking at the percentages, but those will be 45,000 students. For those in the TVET level, 42,000 of them have been categorized as vulnerable students, meaning they will be financed through government scholarships and loans. And of course, students have to apply for these scholarships and the loans as well as the bursaries. So let's take a look at what is going on. The vulnerable are indicated to be 21,800. The government scholarship will be up to 82%, but the balance of 18% will come to them in the form of a loan that is from the Higher Education Loans Board. For the extremely needy students, they are said to be, let me just get that right, they are said to be they are 23,372. They'll get up to 70% of government scholarship. The 30% will be in form of a loan. The families will not contribute anything because the understanding here is that those families are not able to raise any resources for that. Then the needy students, who are 26,488, up to 53% of funding will come from the government, 40% will come from HELB in form of a loan, and then 7% will be raised by the family. For the less needy, 84,000 of them, 38% will be the government scholarship. These are those people that are able to carry on with their lives without needing government support. But then again, there will be a loan of up to 55%, and then 7% to be raised by the families. Let's take a model case here. For instance, if you've been called to study medicine, Bachelor of Medicine and Surgery at the university, Moi University, for instance, the program costs about 612,000 shillings every year. You need 6 years to study there. So if you're from the vulnerable group, remember that you're getting much of the financing from the government side. This is the scholarship that will come from the government. If you need a loan, this is the much that will come. But if you have to look at this less needy student, they will get government scholarship of 232,000. The 336,600 shillings will come from HELB in form of a loan, meaning by the end of all those 6 years, they'll have a loan of 2 million shillings. So this is just a look at some of the funding questions that will have to come from the learners, either government or supported by HELB. And of course, you can go to as many programs as possible. But basically, that's the idea, Yvonne, in terms of what will be going into this financing. But the identification of who is needy, less needy, vulnerable, extremely needy, will be based on means testing that HELB has been saying they have the way and the path to ensure that they know who needs what time.
For that, so Jeffrey, CEO of Universities Fund, Jeffrey Monari, how did we arrive at these categories? How did we decide who is vulnerable, who is extremely needy? How was this arrived at, and very specifically, even with numbers?
This was arrived after doing a lot of simulations and studies over the years based on the data and the students that have been admitted in Kenyan universities and have gone through the loan system and have been awarded over the years for the last 25 years, which HELB has been doing using the MTI. So we used this MTI to ensure and look at what categories of students do we have who are admitted to the universities. And we established that there are 4 categories, that is vulnerable, extremely needy, needy and less needy. That is how we came up with these categories.
But, Dr. Kikurui Lang'at wewe ndio unasimamia TVETs. Na ilivyo ni kwamba wanafunzi wengi huwa hawapati nafasi ya kuingia katika vyuo vikuu. Mara nyingi karibu kila mwaka ni karibu 20% pekee ambao hupata nafasi ya kuingia katika vyuo vikuu, lakini wewe wachukua asilimia kama 70 hivi ya wale wanafunzi ambao wamekosa alama za kujiunga na vyuo vikuu. Mwanzo kabisa wafurahia mtindo huu mpya ambao umeanzishwa sasa kufadhili elimu katika vyuo vikuu na pia taasisi za kiufundi ambazo unasimamia?
Thank you. I think as my colleague Geoffrey mentioned, that over time, especially in TVET, there was no funding until 2016 when the government introduced what is called capitation and we are funding the students the flat rate of 30,000, regardless of whether you're needy, extremely needy, but now scientifically determining who is supposed to benefit, so that those who are extremely needy can actually be able to go to training without necessarily asking the parents, the neighbors to raise this. Second is that we have seen over time that we have been able to increase the enrollment in the TVET sector from less than 200,000 in the last 4 years to currently we are in excess of 600,000. And one of the factors that contributed towards this is because of funding, where people are able to train without any necessarily getting pressure for looking for school fees. We believe the funding model that is going to be implemented will actually enable more extremely needy cases to come to the institution, because ideally there were some people who are benefiting from funding when in the real sense they are not maybe needy or need this kind of support. Probably I came from private school where school fees was much more than this. We will, and you mentioned rightly that we are looking at close to 70% of basic transition into higher education, but I still believe that we need to push that number into close to 80, looking at the job opportunities and the demand for the middle level cadre of labor, and therefore making sure that we have not only funding for the student, but also in terms of infrastructure and equipment to ensure that we don't only take these people through this system, but to make sure that they obtain quality education.
No, bila shaka ni swala ambalo ni tete sana, ni swala ambalo lina utata kidogo, lakini tutapata kupata kwa undani zaidi kuhusiana na masuala haya. Lakini kwanza tuende kwake Sam Gituko na Mashirima Kapombe, ambapo wataweza kuangalia hisia za wataalamu mbalimbali walio katika sekta hii ya elimu, nao wanasema nini kuhusiana na masuala ambayo inaibuka kuhusiana na elimu. Sam.
Mashirima.
Naam, shukran Lincoln. Bila shaka lile swali kuu ambalo tungependa wataalamu wetu waweze kutujibu, na nikianza na wewe Daktari Emmanuel Manyasa, ni ukiangalia jinsi mapendekezo yalivyo, yanaweza kutekelezwa ama ni ile swala la kwamba kwenye makaratasi mali tunaandika mambo yanaonekana mazuri, lakini ikifika wakati wa utekelezwaji kutakuwa na changamoto?
Shukran Mashirima. Kwangu mimi nafikiri sisi tulitoa maoni tukasema kuwe na differentiated model ya funding na ni muhimu, lakini nafikiri kwamba tusirudie ile desturi yetu kama Wakenya ya kila siku kufanya jambo zuri liharibike kwa kutekeleza vibaya. Na kwa maoni yangu ni kwamba mpango wa serikali wa kwenda njia hii ya kusema kwamba tutatofautisha ufadhili tunawapea kila mwanafunzi kulingana na mahitaji ni muhimu, lakini kwangu hatuko tayari kutekeleza sasa. Kwa sababu gani? Zile fedha ambazo tunasema tunataka kupeana kama mkopo, ukiangalia ni nyingi mno. Tukumbuke kwamba HELB haikuweza kuwafadhili wanafunzi wote walioitisha mikopo mwaka huu ambao umekamilika, na wengi wao walikuwa wanahitaji shilingi 40,000 na HELB haikuweza kuwapa sababu walisema walikosa ufadhili kutoka Treasury. Sasa tunataka kupeana mikopo ya shilingi 1,100 na 1,300. Hizo fedha zipo?
Naam, bila shaka ni swali kuu. Sam.
Right, and Dr. Kilemi Mwire, you once served at the Ministry of Education, specifically higher education as an assistant minister. And of course, as you look at what is being proposed to ensure that learners are able to finance who they are able to based on their families, does this promote equity, especially if it reflects that, for instance, that course that we just highlighted, Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery, that a student will have to finish school if they are lucky to get the help with a loan of 2 million shillings. But also, how do you weigh the means testing formula? How well are you able to know who qualifies for what at what time?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Getuko. That's the idea, you know, like Munyasa said, the idea is not a bad one, because there are a lot of students in the university who can actually afford, especially if you consider that the majority of the students in our universities come from the privileged schools disproportionately. So they come from schools where they've been in academies, their parents are able to pay that, they're able to pay for expensive secondary education. But there is a group that will find it very, very difficult to make it through, as is the case now. First, for me, the main problem, the main problem is whether or not, assuming that this works, because it's a good idea, will it be done in a way that there is no corruption, there are no cartels. The problem with CDF, as you have known, as you have heard many times, is that there's so much corruption that not always the most needy benefit. Secondly, you give the numbers of who are considered less needy.
Right.
Less needy are well-off kids, more or less, compared to the most vulnerable. They are the majority in the university. They're the ones who are the majority in the university. So the first question to ask, even before you begin to fund those who are in university, what percentage of the very needy have made it to university? This is the real question. I mean, if you consider the fact that out of 12,000 secondary schools, 5,500 did not have a single kid with a C+.
Naam, bila shaka Janet, kwa sababu Daktari Kilemi ametaja hilo swala la kule kupiga msasa wale ambao wanahitaji. Ni nini ambacho kinapaswa kufanyika ili kuhakikisha katika mfumo huu wale wanaohitaji ndio watajulikana na ndio watapata ufadhili huu? Manake hapo ndio kizungumkuti kipo.
Thank you so much, Mashirima. And I'll first begin by saying that the categorization is welcome. But then again, there's a very big problem. Because even when we were going into the reforms, we knew where the problem was. The problem was never that we had so many children joining the university and we didn't have money. The problem was that government was not meeting its own commitment. That is why we needed to do university reforms. Government was not funding universities the way it was supposed to be. So instead of government upping its game, instead of us seeing government giving more resources, what has the government done? Very cunningly has thrown back the problem to the parents, and the parents are going to be the carriers of this very big burden. And I tend to differ a little bit with people who think that because you're a primary school teacher, you are able. So many people are taking their children to semi-private schools because of the situation that is obtaining in our public schools. So you cannot really say, and you cannot use that criteria to tell a parent that because you attended a low-cost private school, now you are less needy. In fact, that is government's language for telling citizens that you are able, and therefore we have removed our hand from funding universities. Because look at it, how do you explain that a child is going to graduate with a burden of loan of 2 million and there is no guarantee for a job? I think really, this is not a bad idea, but it is too much English packaged together to just make sure that government escapes its own responsibility of funding higher education, and it has now thoroughly and entirely thrown the burden at the parent. Let me tell you the aftermath. The aftermath is going to be so many children will drop out of school, because how do you contest the fact that you have been listed as less needy? How do you go to contest that I've been told I'm less needy? And while we are at it, let us think about how much is 53% that you're being asked to pay. 53% of 420, it's in the regions of 220. Show me one primary school teacher that is going to be affording to take their child, or any other cadre of government employee that is going to be affording to keep their child at a cost of 200,000 in the university.
Right. And Prof. Governor Barachok, so it is a proposal to ensure that universities continue to receive the resources that they need, because apparently the government has not been able to finance them. Does it work? But also the public, the members of the public that are in Bomet County, what are these concerns that they are having to deal with, to an extent that you'll find your neighboring county, Uasin Gishu, has to go ahead and come up with a plan to airlift students with all manner of looking for resources? Is that what you've been forced to do as governors?
Okay, thank you very much, Sami. I want to agree with my colleagues that the proposal is welcome. It's a good idea of making assumption that the parameters that were used were the correct one, and we captured students based on their different needs, of course, classifying them. You have mentioned the issue of universities, and I think we need to understand the background of all these proposals. One, our universities are struggling. They're in debt. And one of the reasons why universities are struggling is because as a government, we have not been able to meet our obligation. We are proposing a new model. shifting away from the old model of differentiated unit cost, where the university was to pay up to 80% of that commitment. But it didn't honor that. I think the highest they paid is around 66%. So over time, the universities, because they have to run, have been accumulating debts with the contractors. So that is one. Secondly, if it has to work, then the government has to commit money into this. Otherwise, the proposal is good because our households are not the same. Personally, I can fund for my children.
Right.
I have also a neighbor who can do the same. But the majority, which is over 99%, are not able. So if we are talking of 53%, as my colleagues has indicated, where will we get that money to cover the difference? At the same time, this problem of employment is compounding the whole problem that we are facing as a country. And here comes the story of Uasin Gishu. From what the students are saying, one, they want higher education, and secondly, prospects of jobs. So they want to study outside the country,
right?
Because the prospects of being employed are very high. So I think if we have to solve all these issues, it should not be solved in isolation.
All right.
What is the challenge that we are facing as a country? So one is the issue of unemployment, and that is why it is forcing our students to sacrifice and do all that and move out of the country for studies, because probably they will get employment after their studies.
Okay.
But I want to agree that this is not our role as county government. In fact, our area is CCD and vocational training centers. But sometimes we are forced to go out of our way because of the suffering of our people to at least try to alleviate that suffering. And sometimes we make mistakes.
Bila shaka, Profesa Odote, manake ulikuwa katika jopo kazi hili wakati ambapo mlikaa na kupendekeza kwamba kujumuishwe hizi hazina zote za ufadhili, iwe ni HELB, iwe ni ile hazina ya TVET na nyinginezo, kusawazisha elimu bora kwa wote. Je, hili lilikuwa lizuie vipi yale masuala yanayotaja Governor Barchok kwamba counties zisije zikajitwika mzigo ambao si wao?
Si county pekee, Kapombe, ni kila mtu. Ukisikiza mwenzangu Dr. Munyasa akiongea, ameuliza swali, je, kuna hela ya kutimiza hizi mambo zote? Mwenzangu Janet amesema, lakini sasa umepatia jamii mzigo. Tulianza kwa kujua kwamba mfumo ya kupeana pesa kwa higher education wa saa hizi haisaidii kwa sababu by the time tulifika 2023 university zote zilikuwa na deni ya billion 54 billion. Tungeendelea hivyo, government had now reached 48% of DUC from 80%. If we continued going at the projections we had, we'll reach around 30. So something had to give. So I think the one thing we must accept is that what we had before was not working. The second reality is that there were very difficult decisions to make. I think decision number one, and I think Munyasa Zanu says, is in reality we have a constrained financial space as a country. Yet higher education is expensive. For the last, I think, around 20 years, we've been lying to ourselves, saying, oh yes, this is the amount it pays. If you ask, everybody has been paying 16,000 shillings for university education. Yet in high school, everybody in high school pays on average 30 to 50,000. So it cannot be that when you reach university, you are saying university is cheaper. That simply wasn't going to work. So the debate was, how do you deal with it in a manner that is sustainable? And like what Janet says about 50%, the actual reality that goes to the household is 7%. If you look at what the households are paying, there's no household that's being asked to pay more than 7%. Even the less needy, that is, and myself is. You know, a loan is not free.
Even
I will come to the loan.
Prof,
I'll come to the loan.
Prof, even though the loan, you get it based on availability of resources and how you're able to make your case at HELB.
Yes, but you see, you'd rather that you make a proposal that makes sense than one that is good from far, but far from good.
Lakini kama hilo pendekezo haliwezi kutekelezwa, kuna haja gani?
and who has said it can't be met.
What is
there tonight and what has to be corrected is the impression that is being given that parents will only pay 7%. No, that is not the position. Parents will actually pay 62%, but upon availability of funds, then you can get a loan and alleviate you. But as we speak tonight, parents will be forced to part with 63% unless there is loan available.
Daktari, because you have also interest in TVET, and you're looking at the numbers, especially what was released by COOPS recently, you're talking about that there are spaces of more than 500,000 more than 500,000 spaces at TVET institutions, but those that have been placed so far is 145,000. Well, there's explanation that intake of TVET continues to happen. But if you look at the transition, it's sort of a narrowing tunnel that very few will get to the university, but also there's a challenge of affordability. A few more may go to the TVET, but there's also a majority that may actually never get to that point. Are we doing enough to ensure that education is actually accessible at the point of post-secondary school qualification?
Yeah, I would actually challenge this model based on an equity question. If you look at the relationship between education and poverty, you realize that children of the poor are the less likely to pass. And so when you look at the ratio of allocation to university and TVET, actually it fails. Because it is TVET where we have poorer students, and it is where parents are expected to pay more. But even within TVET, you find that when you compare the placement of COOPS to university and to TVET, you find that as a ratio of capacity, university we have 55% placed, TVET we have 28% placed. The reason why we have 28% in TVET is because there is no placement of COOPS to the vocational training centers. So COOPS places in the national polytechnics, in the technical training institutes, but not to where now Governor Barchok represents his institutions, which are the vocational training centers. Yet, again, applying the same poverty principle, it is those that get E's and D's that end up in the vocational training centers. And those are also the ones that are immensely coming from the poorer families. So this model actually will end up benefiting richer families more than poorer if you apply this principle. So I think we have to be committed to look at where do the poorest students end, and also take funding there. Because when we exclude 58% of those that are completing, because they cannot be placed by COOPS, they can't access loans, they can't access scholarship. What are we committing to?
Okay, all right. I want us to transition. We'll come back here, but we need to move to the next studio. That is where Trevor and Rashid are, to hear from the stakeholders on what they have to say about this particular matter. Trevor?
Well, thanks, Sam and Mashirima. This brings up the big question on the funding of universities. Let me bring in Akelo Misori over there, and you have a microphone. Just pass the microphone to Akelo Misori, is the KUPPET Secretary General, to tell us, is this funding model practical for parents? Because I saw you looking at a fee structure from a university. Yes. It's on. It's on. It's on. Just start.
It is not on. Is it?
Okay. Let's sort that out and see how that works in just a bit. We're talking about the funding model, whether there's categories of vulnerable scholarships at 80%, extremely needy scholarships at 70%, with a loan of 30%. Is it practical, Akelo?
This funding model apparently is not practical.
Why not?
In my view, I think it is a way of ensuring that many students will definitely discontinue their learning, because the universities are already starved of resources, and therefore this is a model which is basically to generate funds, and once they fail to generate funds, they will force the learners to be out of school.
Okay.
So in my view, I think this funding model is not practical, because the current one has also even failed. Remember, we are in, the universities currently have not given dates of admission, because they were waiting for government to actualize what was offering in terms of funds. But now that it has been given them back in terms of to charge fees, we are likely to have many dropouts in this funding model.
The fee structure you're looking at, which one is it, and what strikes you the most out of that?
The fee structure that I have here is from Kenyatta University, and it has got clusters. Cluster 1B, the first program cost is 600 312,000. First semester is 376,200. Second semester is 122,400. The third semester is 122,400. So that is the first. Then let me just go to the other one is 336. That is cluster 6, where the first semester they pay 201,960,000, and then 134,640, and then the third semester they pay nothing. In this kind of arrangement, and with the kind of situation that we know, I don't think the practicability of this is going to be realized.
Na labda pengine kwa kuchangia hilo, Wilson Sossion, ningependa kupata kauli yako kwa sababu unavyomsikia anasema kwamba utekelezaji wake ni mtihani mkubwa na kuna uwezekano wengi wakashindwa kupata masomo na watakapata masomo watakuja kuwa na madeni katika siku za usoni. Maoni yako ni yapi?
Ya, asante sana. Nafikiri wengi hawajachukua muda kujaribu kuelewa huu mtindo mpya ya kufadhili wanafunzi katika vyuo vikuu. Haijaanza jana. Najua hii inatokea ile inaitwa Education Charter ambaye rais aliweka kidole tarehe 23 mwezi wa June 2022. Na kabla ya hapo kulikuwa na mkutano ya experts ambao walijadili na kutengeneza hiyo charter. Na ilieleweka kwamba vyuo vikuu vyetu vinaanguka. Maana Moi University karibu inafunga, Egerton University zote zinafunga sababu ya poor funding model. Kwamba ile mtindo iliyokuwa ya DUC haijaweza kusaidia vyuo vyetu. Kwa hivyo other than kuongeza pesa katika vyuo vikuu, ilikuwa lazima kwamba tupate model ambayo itahakikisha kwamba wale wote ambao wamekuwa admitted kwa university wanaweza kuendelea kusoma bila kusumbuliwa. If you examine na ukiona hii model kwamba imesema kuna the most vulnerable, au ni the poorest households, na ile data tumeona kwa wengine kwamba hii itasomesha tu watoto wa matajiri, hiyo ni uongo. Watoto ambao wale 140,000 wamekuwa admitted kupitia hiyo statistical data falls under the 4 categories. Na hiyo category ya kwanza, vulnerable and most needy, itachukua watoto karibu wengi katika households ambao ni maskini. Ukiona wale wa second year sahi, third year na fourth year ambao wataendelea katika old model, bado wanalazimishwa kulipa fees tena zile nyumba maskini zaidi. Kwa hivyo hii itaanza na first years na itahakikisha kwamba the poorest households will not pay anything. Wanafunzi wataelekea kwa vyuo vikuu bila kusumbuliwa. Na ukiona stratification yote,
this is where the problem is. Before you even go on, Sossion, that is where the problem is. Yes. How do you then know that this family is vulnerable and this is open to manipulation? And there are some people who say that the data that you have is not as accurate. So if I was able today, then you lose someone, you're not able the next year. And there's nowhere to appeal.
With the fears kwamba kunaweza ingia mambo ufisadi na mengine. Lakini the way this model is done, sababu hiyo tool, mean testing index, shall be administered by Higher Education Loans Board. Hawajakuwa wakifanya hii kazi for the last few years. Wamefanya miaka hii yote. Na data ya wanafunzi wote haitaanza kuanzia admission. Hiyo data yote imekuwa iko kwa mashule zetu NEMIS, na hiyo data inajulikana. Ukienda kwa shule ya Idimuli, wale watoto wamekuwa admitted, inajulikana hata wale walikuwa wanategemea bursaries. Na hii ni kama tu bursaries ya kawaida, kwamba hata kwa constituencies wakipeana bursaries haipeani ovyo ovyo, lazima uangalie, ukuwe na data ya kila familia, itakuwa hapo, itakuwa declared. Na baada ya admission ya KUPS, sababu ili delay, ilikuwa kwamba lazima experts wakalie, wafikirie, wafanye simulation, waone vile itakuwa, Na hiyo sasa baada ya admission, umeona admission letter ndio inaleta fitina mingi kwamba oh, this is very costly. The cost of medicine ni 600. Now that government haitakuwa inapeana capitation direct kwa universities, inapitia wanafunzi. Kwa hivyo lazima hiwe declared kwamba the cost of this course is this much. Na hiyo isibabaishe watu. Sababu hiyo imekuwa hivyo miaka hii yote. Cost of medicine, training a student in medicine at the University of Nairobi, imekuwa above 600,000. Na haijakuwa declared sababu hii capitation na pesa ya serikali haijakuwa ikilipiwa kupitia wanafunzi. Sasa vile inapitia wanafunzi, kila mwanafunzi lazima apate fee structure ile ina declare total cost of that course kwa mwaka. Alafu ya tatu na ya mwisho ndio Wakenya wasibabaike. Pesa ya kufadhili universities imeongezwa from 54 billion to 84. Ya Higher Education Loans Board from 13 billion to 30 billion. Na president mwenyewe amesema, amekuwa very deliberate kwamba pesa iwekwe kwa budget. Na tunajua kwamba katika entire sector ya elimu.
Samani kidogo tusione kwamba shida si pesa kuwepo, ni kutumia hizo pesa, kwa sababu zinaweza kuwa hata zaidi ya hizo bilioni za kutaja, lakini kwamba ule uadilifu wa pesa ndio unawatia hofu wale ambao katika hukumu.
Ningependa kuhakikisha Wakenya kwamba kama kuna mahali hakutakuwa na mchezo hata siku moja, ni hii maneno ya kufadhili watoto katika vyuo vikuu. Na rais mwenyewe ako hands-on, experts wako hands-on, na hiyo fears kama ya Kelo na wengine ni kawaida, ni njia ya kufanya conversation ileweke. Lakini
hold on for a second. Let's cross over to Kibra and hear what the parents have to say where Hassan Mugambi is standing by. Hassan?
Naam, shukran sana kwa upande wa pili wa studio. Tuko hapa katika eneo la Kibra. Kama ulivyosema, ni mengi ambayo tumekuwa tukiyasikia na ni mengi ambayo nimekuwa nikitazama tu baadhi ya wazazi na walimu ambao wako nasi hii leo, na wamekuwa ni wenye kutoa hisia mbalimbali kuambatana na yale ambayo yamekuwa yakiendelea katika studio. Lakini siko peke yangu na mwenzangu.
Asante sana Hassan, na jinsi ulivyosema mambo mengi yametendeka na yanapangiwa mjini, lakini hapa ndipo msumeno unapatana na mbao, wakati wazazi, walimu na wanafunzi wanatwikwa jukumu la kuhakikisha kwamba mambo haya yote yamefanikishwa. Je, wanayafahamu? Na la msingi, wana uwezo wa kubeba huo mzigo? Tunazungumza nao hivi sasa. Hassan, uwanjani wako.
Na bila shaka, na kile ambacho ufadhili ambao umezungumziwa hapa mwanzo kabisa ni kwamba watakuwa wanatafuta na kuangazia baadhi tu ya wale watu ambao wanajiweza, wengine ambao wanajiweza kiasi, wengine hawajiwezi kabisa, ili wakoe ni wenye kupata ufadhili. Ninao baadhi ya walimu wa shule za msingi na vile vile kabisa za sekondari katika mtaa huu wa Kibra, na ni hapo ambapo wanasema wanao wale wanafunzi ambao wanajiunga na shule ama chuo ama vyuo vikuu. Je, mumepatwa kuulizwa tu kama munao wale wanajiweza, wale hawajiwezi, ama swala hili lote la ufadhili nyinyi mnaliona vipi?
Okay, I'm the head teacher of Olympic Primary School. Olympic has got 5,546 children. Majority of the children are from the informal settlements, and 3/4 of the parents are poor, generally poor, and most of them are single mothers. And the criteria of grouping people under vulnerability, needy, and what have you, I don't know the criteria the government is going to use, because we are the people on the ground, and we have not been contacted, because we know these people at household levels. So if this thing is to succeed, they need to come down to us at school level, because most of us, especially the teachers, they know these children from their family background. So if that can be employed, then the criteria will be workable. But if it will be taken that because you are, let's say you are in Alliance Boys, you are in Starehe, then it's likely that you are able. It's not really true because majority of the children in Olympic, those who go to those high-end schools are sponsored by well-wishers. So if it is taken that because this child is in Mangu, he must have been in a position to go under or be rated as being not needy, it will be a misplaced idea. So our plea to the government is that let's go down to the stakeholders, get the real facts, but not basing it on data that is fed on NEMIS. Thank you.
Asante sana Hassan. Na hapa ya uwezo wao wa kufanikisha masomo jinsi yalivyopendekezwa ya masomo ya juu. Niambie jina lako alafu niambie, je, unaufahamu mfumo mpya wa malipo ya university kama yalivyopendekezwa?
Ndio nafahamu. Mimi naitwa Khadija Ahmed. Sina mtoto wa university, niko na wa primary. Changamoto uwezo ndio hatuna. Kwa sasa hivi sisi wengine tuko na watoto nyumbani. Kama mimi hivi niko na watoto wawili grade 7 na 8, wote wako kwangu nyumbani. Nimeshindwa, nimelemewa, baba wao aliaga.
Wakati mwingine tunaona katika zile namba za serikali wanasema kwamba wale watu ambao wako mjini huenda wana hali ya juu ya maisha kuliko wale wako vijijini. Labda wakifuata huo mfumo, watu wa hapa mjini watakuwa wamepata disadvantage ya aina gani?
Hiyo ni ngumu sana. Sisi wenye tuko vijijini ni ngumu kwetu.
Asante. Uwanja ni wako Hassan.
Naam, shukrani sana, na labda nikiendea tu wale ambao tuko nao hapa pia vile vile kabisa, swala la ufadhili huo wa vyuo vikuu, wewe unalichukulia vipi? Kwanza kabisa utaanza na majina yako na ujitangulize kwa mtazamaji, alafu useme unalichukulia vipi swala hilo la ufadhili ama mfumo mpya wa ufadhili wa masomo ya vyuo vikuu.
Shukrani sana kwa kuweza kunipea nafasi ili niweze kuangazia. Kwa majina naitwa Eskimos Kobiento Kirumbe. I'm the Secretary General, mwakilishi wa wazazi Kenya mzima. Kwa hivyo hii nafasi nimeweza kupewa ni kuhusu mambo ya ufadhili wa watoto wa secondary school. Mimi kama vile mwalimu amesema, nikiwa mwakilishi wa wazazi, hatujawahi kuhusishwa hata kwa task force yote. Na hata mkiangalia wakati ilitoka, how can the government say that the parents are not participating in the task force reform and then they want to implement without us? So ni kumaanisha ya kwamba hayo maneno yote yanafanywa saa ingine sisi kama wazazi tunaona katika magazeti, tukiangalia asubuhi tunaambia kuna kitu inaendelea, hivyo ndivyo inaendelea. Hata hii mambo ya kufadhili kusema huyu mtoto ametoka jamii maskini. Sisi kama wazazi tuko na sub county and also at the school level. We are supposed to be involved in identifying watoto wale hawana uwezo, tukitumia mpaka nyumba 10 ili watoto wale wanaenda katika hiyo vyuo vikuu wawe the right thing. Lakini nimeweza kusikia kwamba wakati wanafadhili ni vile mtoto ataweza kujaza kwa ile fomu. Hiyo itakuwa na udanganyifu mingi kwa sababu kila mtoto ataweza ajaze kitu ambazo akistahili. Na hiyo imekuwa ikitokea hata wakati Equity ina fund na hata wakati NGOs ina fund kunakuwa na udanganyifu mingi. Kwa hivyo itakuwa na uwazi wowote.
Na mje unaona kwamba kutakuwa na uwazi kama alivyosema?
Shukran Bwana Hassan Mugambi. Naitwa Benson Adika. Ni naibu mwalimu mkuu katika shule ya msingi ya Kikoshep ambayo iko katika mtaa wa Kibra. Kwa hakika jambo la ufadhili wa vyuo vikuu limezua hali ya eti na wasiwasi mwingi kwa baadhi ya wazazi. Kwa sababu tukiangalia mfano wazazi ambao wanaishi katika mtaa wa mabanda wa Kibra, wengi wao hawajapata habari kamili. Hasa kwanza tukianzia hata mtaala wenyewe wa umilisi hawajaielewa zaidi. Kwa hivyo swala la ufadhili wa vyuo vikuu ilipoingia na tayari wakaona ya kwamba jopo kazi tayari limeleta mapendekezo, wengi waliduazwa kwa sababu hapa Kibra tunajua kwamba licha ya kwamba tuko na wale ambao ni walezi ambao si wazazi, wanaishi na wanafunzi wengi na watoto ambao ni mayatima, na wengi wao ni wale ambao wana nafasi nzuri sana ya kubobea katika mambo ya masomo na kujiendeleza. Lakini tunagundua ya kwamba ni mambo kile ambacho kinawapatia wasiwasi ni kwamba ni njia zipi ambazo zitatumika kujua mwanafunzi ama mtoto mwenye anapaa kufuata ufadhili kamili. Pengine kungekuwa na wangehusishwa, waulizwe maswali mawili matatu, wawe na need assessment, waingie katika nyumba zao ili waweze kutambua wenyewe ya kwamba huyu mtoto kwa hakika tukijaribu kulinganisha na kulinganua na yule mwingine anafaa pate, na anapewa kiasi gani. Lakini kule kutepa tu kwamba wamejitokeza kwamba ishasemekana kwamba wale watapata hivi pengine kwa kutumia vigezo ambavyo vipo tayari kwenye takwimu zilizotolewa hapo mbeleni, ambapo pengine vinaweza vikawa na mabadiliko kidogo. Wazazi wanasema ya kwamba kuwe na uwazi, na kwa kuleta maswali hayo moja kwa moja, pengine kuna idadi kubwa ya wanafunzi wasiojiweza, na hasa wale mayatima. Tunaongea kuhusu wale ambao pengine wazazi wao wameaga dunia kutokana na janga la ukimwi, na kuna wale ambao pia wako na wazazi mmoja, wale ambao wanapata shida zaidi, hata wale ambao pengine wametoroka nyumbani na wamekuja kuishi na jamaa zao hapa hivi. Kwa hivyo wazazi wengi bado wanasema kwamba hawajahusishwa, na hata wanafunzi wenyewe wale wanaojiunga na sekondari msingi, the JSS, hawana ubari kamili kwamba watakapotoka katika grade ya 9 watakapojiunga na senior, hawana ukweli ya kwamba pengine iwapo watakuwa wanapata ufadhili wa kutosha pengine ama wasaidiwe na hizi shule, lakini watakapokuingia vyuo vikuu hawana uhakika ya kwamba iwapo masomo yao yataweza kuendelea jinsi wanavyohitaji.
Bila shaka sijui wanasemaje pale upande huo wa pili, Waweru.
Asante sana Hassan. Nimejiunga na mwenzangu hapo ambaye ananiambia yeye ni mfadhili ambaye mwalimu hapo ameweza kuongea juu yake. Kazi yake ni kukusanya wale wanafunzi ambao wanatembea mitaani, anawasaidia kufanikisha masomo yao. Lakini sasa wanatiwa eti na wazo jipya la kuweza kufanikisha mambo ya masomo. Karibu sana, uniambie ni jambo gani ambalo mnaona litakuwa nzito katika huu mfumo mpya, nyinyi ambao mko katika idara ya kuwafadhili wanafunzi ambao hawajiwezi, haswa wale ambao wanazurura mitaani?
Okay, asante sana. Kwa niaba ya kila mtu, mimi naitwa John, na manage Children's Home Springs of Life hapa Kibera, iko under Grace Mbithi. Jambo la kwanza nataka kuongelea about the loan, the money that these guys are supposed to be paying after they're done with studies. As we know, the poor, vulnerable guys, it's not easy for them to get a job. Most of the guys who get jobs are those well-being, rich people. So after you're done with the schooling, hata kama ulipata D, you're going to get a job because maybe your father is wealthy. But these guys from the street, that you pick them from the street, ni ngumu sana upate akona well-wisher. So unapata their life before, it's a hectic, it's just terrible. Then he's finishing school, he wants to start a new life, a new beginning. Then boom, member deni ya 2 million. Imagine that. So I could maybe urge the government to try as much as they can, do the bursary for the vulnerable without them paying an extra cash at the end of the day after they're done with their studies. They give them bursaries or presidential bursaries. Then they give them a small amount of money for them to pay after they are done their study, because this is a street children, this is an orphan. Ajui ataanza wapi, imagine that. So the moment amemaliza shule anaona there's a light at the tunnel, anapatana na loan nyingine, alafu kuna hizi taxations zimekuja, alafu akishapata job tena zimeanza kuongezwa juu. Do you think we are helping them? We are just making their life worse and more worse. You know, it's not right. I think they should just consider.
Asante sana. Yeah. Labda kwa heshima upitishe kipaza sauti kwa mwenzangu. Huyu ni mwanafunzi. Labda ukiangalia mfuko wa mzazi wako, alafu uangalie mapendekezo ya malipo ya university ambao tuko nayo kwa sasa, mzazi anawezana na huu mzigo?
Thank you. To be sincere, sioni kama atawezana because you see, previously the government used to give some amount, and then there was also things like help to give some amount. There were bursaries, but now this new criteria that they are starting, it will be very difficult for us. Yeah.
I'm sure you interact with some of your fellows and colleagues in school. What is their biggest fear with the new proposals?
Actually, you see, the life that we live in right now, finding a job is already difficult. So making learning again more difficult, it is becoming so hectic. So what I can say is that if they could make even the learning to be a bit easier, it will be better, because to be sincere, not many people will be able to pay it. And the moment education is for the rich and jobs are also for the rich, then how about the poor now?
Good. Yeah. Hassan, tulikuahidi ya kwamba tutakuwa hisia na masikio ya wale ambao tuko nao mashinani, na hizo ndizo hisia zao.
Na labda kuna mwanafunzi hapo mbele atueleze tu anafadhili vipi masomo yake ya sheria na anasomea wapi. Kwanza kabisa utaanza tu na majina yako yote mawili kisha utueleze.
Thank you very much. My name is Albert Ombongi. I'm a law student at Mount Kenya University Parklands Law Campus. Allow me first to say this. In such times when the country is economically crippled, most comrades are struggling to put food on their table. Most comrades are struggling with depression for missing exams, and it is really devastating. When we talk about this categorization model, first allow me to say this. I've been listening to the experts from the government studio, but allow me to say this. Even as we are engaging in this conversation, let us engage in this conversation and this debate in a sobriety manner, devoid of emotions and parochialism. Why am I saying this? As students, we understand the niches that we have seen in the issuance of the High Education Loans Board loans. We have cases whereby there are needy students who have been struggling, who have been missing out, who have been missing these loans. And we have students who are not needy students, but they have been benefiting and receiving high amounts of loans as compared to the needy cases. So even as we are moving to the categorization of these needy cases, there is still no clarity on the same, because we need to understand that which method really is going to differentiate between a vulnerable person, an extremely needy, a less needy, and a needy person. Let me finish by saying this. I had someone respond to an issue, there was an issue matter, and they said we need to make our education to be more attractive. And I want to pose a question. How can we make our education attractive? By making it more expensive. Thank you.
Naam, shukrani sana. Huyu ni mwanafunzi wa sheria kutoka chuo kikuu hapa nchini Kenya, na sasa nakurejesha katika studio ambapo nitampa Jael fursa hii ya kuendeleza shughuli nzima ya masomo.
Thank you, Mugambi. And right here I am with the comrades that are in the studio, and we've had several of your colleagues who've also spoken about the funding issue, and you've been categorized. Teddy, if we'll start off with you, where do you belong in this category of funding?
Jael, first I would like to join in solidarity our comrades who was in Gishu, that is. Justice delayed is justice denied, and we want to hope that justice will be served. Secondly, I don't know where I belong in this category, but what I have to make very concrete. They've been put like the needy, very needy. I don't know where to put myself in, because, you know, they have introduced something called the MTI. How will I now categorize myself with the MTI? This is something that not most of the students know or are familiar with. But then, let me say that these fees are overly exaggerated. And it means those students who are joining universities, it's like they are being punished for being born wise. We didn't choose to be born wise as comrades. We are here to access education. We want to change our future. And I have to state categorically that the comrades are not impressed. They are depressed. I will be blatantly lying that the students are happy. So sooner or later, the government will have to set aside some money and funds to build more prisons, more rehabilitation and wellness centers, because that is where we are heading, sincerely speaking. Yeah.
Thank you. And Samuel, when I come to you, and also still on the funding model, and you know you're a continuing student, so the new model won't affect you much, but you have a say in it. Comparing it with the funding model that you have right now as a continuing student.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jael. I would also like to join my students who are very sad all over the country. Students are sad, and I won't lie that students are happy. They are not happy about the funding model, not even the new one, but even the old model.
Should they maintain the old model?
Yeah, maybe they can improve. They can maintain it and they improve, because you find, for instance, our case, I'm in TVET, I'm in Kabete National Polytechnic, but you find that we were promised while we were joining that we will be funded with some cash, and 30% will come from the government. So that money, you find that after some years that you have schooled, maybe 2 years, when you are in your final year, for instance, in our school, we never received fourth quarter of capitation. And then the government, the Ministry of Education, sent a letter to us saying that due to budget constraint and financial issues, that we will not receive that fourth quarter. Then you will need to go back to the parent, discuss with her or him, telling her that the government did not pay. So
where does the money come from? To finish up your learning and your education, and that's where maybe you can also bring you in. Yeah. You seeing the burden that your parents are facing to educate you, and also for the others that are coming in. Where is this money going to come from?
Jael, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And I would like to share in the sentiments of Albert Obogi, who has said that probably most of the comrades in the country, they are suffering, and that is the truth, because some of them, they are even sleeping hungry. If you ask around, ask these leaders that I came with, they will tell you that even some of their comrades, they're asking for 100 bob for supper. So when we introduce other things, and you see what will happen with this model, Jael, is that the government, what it has done, it has transferred the burden now to the student. Remember that we have always been having problems with the capitation. The government has only been able to meet 55%. And now they are telling us that for you to be, they are not going to be funding the universities, so that burden can now be transferred to the student. If the government fails to remit that money to the student,
as
then
you say, there's been some failure.
Exactly. That means that burden is going directly to be billed in the account of the student. And Jael, trust me, it is so disheartening to hear that a 23-year-old student, a 23-year-old youth has a loan of up to 2 million. You can imagine, and you are just going out to start your business, and probably you are starting on to tarmac because you are just finished. Then secondly, Jael, I feel that this new funding model has also opened a leeway to ensure that the institutions have now come in to institute a fee increment. I have talked to a number of my members before I came here. Most of them, probably, let me just quote, Catholic University. They were being charged 39,000. Right now, they have been given a new fee structure. It's up to 100,000. So you can actually see what they have done. They have given a leeway to the institutions to surcharge the students. Thirdly, I feel that the government should have an annex law or an annex clause whereby we will delay some of the implementation of some of these recommendations, because we can't be having, you have heard from all the stakeholders, there's nobody who is happy. So who are these recommendations made for? That is our question.
And that is the big question that we are winding up with.